Alright guys, it is time for part 2 where we are asking what is the most mysterious / paranormal things you've witnessed. If you missed the first part, then don't forget to go and check out that video. You don't have to watch that one first though. I just had way too many stories to fit into one video, so let's get into these. One I posted before. I'll be the first to say that all this stuff could have taken place in my head. The mind is a freaky thing and can play some pretty trippy tricks on you. Sorry for the length. Whenever I was scared as a kid, my dad had always told me that in life you should not be scared of a ghost. Fear the living because they can actually hurt you. In my late teenage years, I came into some money after my father committed suicide and I received an inheritance from him. At the time of my dad's passing, he and my mom owned a cabin up in Oregon by Mount Bachelor. The cabin had been put up for sale since my mom could no longer afford the payments and renting it out was not covering the payments either. The cabin was set to go on the market for sale in less than a month and was in the process of finalising all the paperwork with the realtor and lawyer. So for that month's time, the cabin was not going to be rented out any longer and was going to be vacant. I saw this as a chance to get away for a while and clear my head in light of all the things going on. I quit work, packed up my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog and headed up in my dad's car that he had willed to me to the cabin. Now this was our family cabin that my parents rented out throughout the years when we were not using it. I had keys to the cabin and also had the code for the alarm, so I did not feel the need to stop at the rental management company and advise them of my stay. This has nothing to do with the coming story, but felt the need to mention it anyway. My first 2 days at the cabin were normal and nothing out of the unusual happened. Spent my days playing with my dog in the snow, snowboarding, and in the evenings playing PlayStation or listening to music, drinking and smoking out on the balcony. I'd already stocked up on food, cigarettes and liquor, so I was pretty much a shut-in aside from the occasional out to hit the slopes. With my dog as company and DVDs / PlayStation as entertainment, I was quite content and started to feel relaxed after all the drama that had preceded my outing. The cabin itself was 2 stories. Bottom story had the living room and a side guest room along with a small kitchen. Upstairs had another 2 rooms along with a walkout balcony attached to the master bedroom. Most of my time there was spent either in the living room, kitchen or master bedroom. I never ventured into the other rooms and always kept the doors leading into them shut. Open doors to dark rooms always creeped me out. Anyhow, the 3rd day came around and I was going through my usual routine of playing with my dog. His name was Midnight by the way, and he's also since passed. Playing games and watching DVDs. That day it was pretty heavy snowfall, so I did not feel like trekking down the hill to the main road in my car and decided to stay in. That's when things started getting a bit weird. In our area, there were only 2 other cabins adjacent to ours, maybe a block away from each other. All other cabins aside from those 2 were around a mile away from ours. Surrounding us was mostly forest and very tall pine trees. Tall. This is important later on. Both these cabins were empty, and from the past couple of days I knew that no one was currently staying there. Gave enough background and I'm going to jump into the weirdness. Around midday, while outside with my dog, I noticed what looked like footprints in the snow around the area surrounding our cabin. It was still snowing, so the footprints looked semi-fresh, like someone had been there in the last 20 to 30 minutes before me. I thought that maybe someone was staying in the cabin near me that I may not have noticed. Maybe they were shut-ins like me. Alright, whatever. The prints led away from the cabin and they disappeared in the snow towards a denser part of the trees, disregarded the footprints and went back inside. Nighttime came around and decided to head to bed. My dog Midnight was laying on the bed with me and I noticed his ears perk up to a standstill / listening position. This was followed by him quickly jumping off the bed and running downstairs to the living room. I lay in bed and stayed silent. I was kind of freaked out and could hear him moving around downstairs back and forth. After around 5 minutes he ran back upstairs to me and started to do his doggy dance for the sign that he had to pee or that he wanted to go outside. Shit. Well, fine. I can't say no to him, so we both went downstairs to the outside driveway for him to do his thing. Only, he didn't want to pee. As soon as we were outside, he started to pull on his leash, trying to drag me to where he wanted to go. He kept looking into the dense part of the trees where the prints had been earlier, but he also kept sniffing the side of the house and looking up towards the roof. After he figured out that I was not going to go where he wanted, he sat himself down and just stared into the darkness. A bit unusual for him, but alright, maybe there are forest animals out there that he wants to chase down, but this, did not want to chance anything, so I pulled him back inside and we both headed back upstairs. Around half an hour later, I was lying in bed when I heard what sounded like hooves walking on my roof. It was only a series of around 6 steps, and I rationalised that it could be a pine cone falling from a tree onto the roof, or maybe a kind-hearted forest animal running around. But here's the thing, the steps seemed to be spaced apart like a man-length stride, so it was really freaking me out. Midnight also heard the noise and was quick to run to the balcony screen door, expecting for me to let him out. Alright, you know what, I'm a tough guy, and at the time considered myself to be fairly well built and strong enough to handle myself. So I grabbed my coat and shoes along with my cigarettes and flashlight and went out onto the balcony. Right? As soon as I was outside, I lit up my cigarette and started canvassing the roof with my light. Nothing there, and the snow on top was undisturbed. Weird. Must have been all my head. What about Midnight hearing the noise? Maybe he was feeding off my fear or paranoia. I started to calm down and relax again. By the way, I am shaking right now, my heart is beating hard as I am typing this next bit. My eyes started to adjust to the darkness and I kept smoking and just staring at the stars and trees next to our cabin. That's when I saw it. In a tree that was a little taller than our cabin and around 20 feet from the balcony, I saw what looked like a man crouched in a squatting position in between 2 branches. It was squatted on one branch and its arms were extended above its head, holding onto the branch above it. F*** me. What the f*** is that? I wasn't sure if I was really seeing this thing and stood just staring and sat there motionless. I noticed Midnight stand up and start pacing behind me and lightly barking at the same time. The thing still did not move. I put my cigarette out and was debating on shining the light in the thing's direction, but something in my head kept screaming not to. So I walked backwards to the inside of the room and pulled Midnight with me. Once inside, I locked the door and shined the light in the thing's direction, but there was nothing there. I shut the curtains to the screen door and retreated back to bed. But later on in the night, I heard light tapping at the screen door, like someone was tapping on the glass with their fingers. It was consistent and did not stop for nearly an hour. Midnight seemed to stare at the door, but he wouldn't go near it anymore. The weirdest part was that I had a feeling like someone was inviting me to open the door, but at the same time, I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head telling me to stay in bed and not to do it. I listened to my dad's voice and just stayed where I was. Passed out eventually and woke up in the morning and everything was normal. The rest of the week I spent there was non-eventful and nothing else out of the ordinary happened. I totally admit that it could have been all in my head. A lot of stuff was going on at the time, so I was pretty f***ed up from all the drama. I would have gotten the f*** out of there. No way I would have stayed the rest of the week. Yeah, I kind of agree with that commenter there. That story was terrifying. I literally had chills on my back for the second half of that. Wow. A few years ago, my best friend and I moved into a rent house. It was definitely a weird house, and I got some weird vibes out of it. Every night when I went to sleep, I would hear music. Not singing, just music, like someone had a distant radio on, and not any song I could ever name. I had dreams every night of a crowd of faceless people with a little boy standing in front. He never spoke, but I could tell he was trying to tell me something. The fridge would often open up on its own and the cats would hiss at corners and such. We would smell cigarette smoke coming from the back room at 3 o'clock every day. My aunts were, still are, big into ghost hunting, so they set up cameras in my house one night. We didn't catch much, but one of the cameras was spun in circles for about 15 seconds, and at 3 in the morning, the front porch light turned itself on and got really bright and then faded off. When I moved out of the house after 2 years, I had trouble sleeping because I didn't have the music anymore. It was definitely a strange house. Probably just some swamp gas reflecting off some clouds. This is my comment from a previous thread. My company headquarters in Germany was supposedly haunted. I figured the guys, NCOs and even the first sergeant were just fucking with me before I had to be CQ. So it's like 2 AM and I start hearing shit coming from upstairs. A broom being pushed down the hallway, voices, hell I even smelled cigarette smoke. I go outside to see if there are any cars in the lot, even though to get into the building you had to go right past me. Nobody parked outside. I go back inside. I'm still hearing voices and the other stuff. I slowly creep up the stairs and I can clearly hear the voices speaking German. I get to the top. Nothing. No people, voices are gone, no brooms left out, but the smell of cigarettes was still in the air. That's what I'm going to do if I come back as a ghost, start sweeping an office building. My mom grew up in a rural part of Guatemala where witchcraft was a real thing and has so many stories of the weird she and her brothers and sisters experienced there. Of all the stories she tells, the creepiest one deals with a young apprentice to a witch doctor who travelled around the country healing people. He was murdered west of Guatemala City, and they had arranged to bring his body back to be buried there. They paid bottom dollar to have some poor go pick up the body and bring it back to his pickup truck. The guy gets there, loads the coffin on his truck and starts heading back, but his truck breaks down on the way. He gets out and frantically tries to get the truck back on the road, as he has to be back in time for the services to start. He is completely alone in the dark hours of the early morning, and a man in a nice suit comes from out of nowhere to help him out. The man gets his truck back in working order and walks back down the road into the darkness. The guy gets the body back in time, and after some prep, they begin the services. He happens to walk by the open coffin to pay his respects, and sees that the dead man in the coffin is the very same man who had helped him with his truck. To this day, I get shivers thinking about it. My dad died in a motorcycle accident a few years ago, and after he died, weird started happening at my dorm when I got back. The clock would fall off the wall and change time, batteries would separate themselves from remotes, and bangs and knocks were regular. But the weirdest thing that happened was when I was back home from college and I took a shower, got dressed, and was headed back into the bathroom to finish getting ready, and the mirror was just clearing off the steam, and lo and behold, I see smear marks faintly that look like lettering. So I tip the mirror because it's one of those triple pane medicine cabinet mirrors, and I see "Hey" spelled out in his handwriting with the 11 symbol that was used in the Lord of the Rings that my dad would put everywhere. This was probably 6 or more months after he passed, and I have no idea where it came from since it was only me and my mom in the house, and I know she wouldn't do that. I have a picture of it I will try to find. The crazy part is like a week before that, I had broken open a glow stick and it splashed on the mirror, but the writing was under the splashes and none was smeared or touched. Still to this day cannot explain how it happened. We actually took the entire mirror off the wall so it wasn't ruined. Found the photo. The writing to the right was my brother's attempt of communicating back. Didn't work. I posted this story elsewhere, but it definitely applies. I was in 7th grade and we just moved into a mill town house, one of the houses built close by a dam and textile mill that used to house the families of mill workers. The upstairs area always gave me an eerie feeling, but I shrugged it off as the discomfort of living in a new place. From the beginning I had trouble sleeping and was jolted awake in the middle of the night repeatedly for no apparent reason. Then I started hearing the thumping. It started as occasional soft thumps, seemingly coming from the attic. I had my dad check it out to ease my mind, but he found no explanation. Fast forward a few weeks, the occasional knocking was becoming louder and I continued to wake up in the middle of the night. One night I was jolted awake again, but this time I heard a loud bang, accompanied by the sound of breaking plastic. I looked to my window across the room and the blinds had been completely torn and were in disarray. My door was closed, the windows were closed, and the house was locked up tight. I don't think I've ever run so fast in my life. I made it downstairs pretty quickly and the sound woke my parents, so they went upstairs to check it out. They found no cause or explanation. I slept on the couch downstairs until we moved shortly afterwards. An update to the original, my parents still live in a neighbourhood not far from the house, and I've noticed that it never keeps an occupant for too long. Also, I never experienced anything similar until this year. I live in an apartment with 3 other people, and on occasions on which one of us has been home alone around 2 AM, we've heard knocking sounds as if someone is at the door. In my roommate's experience, the knocking quits when she answers the front door. In my experience, the knocking stopped when I turned the lights on. It's pretty eerie. About 10 years ago, I was walking one night with my sister. We were passing a familiar spot on the road when suddenly we both found ourselves about 200 meters back the way we had just come, approaching a familiar point for the second time. She turned to me and said, "What just happened?" We both experienced exactly the same thing, like we had just been pulled back 20 seconds in time, and neither of us could explain it. No spooky ghosts, but a lasting feeling of something deeply unnatural having happened. So this is a story from my family. When my mom was a young girl growing up in Vietnam, she had this weird dream about being in a darkened church. Everyone was talking in hushed tones, but it was English, so she didn't understand what was going on, but she remembered certain details, like the stained glass windows and the baptismal font. She told her parents, but they were kinda dismissive. They just told her it was a weird dream. A few years later, she was forced to flee South Vietnam because of the Vietnam War. Her family relocated to Florida, and they started their life over. About 10 years later, she went to the local Catholic church for her younger sister's confirmation, and suddenly she realized it was the same church she had dreamt of as a child. The same darkened church, the same stained glass, the same baptismal font. She talked to her parents again, and they remembered her having the dream and describing the place exactly. Maybe some of it is altered memory, but it's one of our family legends. I swear like that actually happens a lot. I don't believe in any of that stuff, but when my dreams become reality just a day or two later, it makes me wonder. I have memories that are very early, and most of them are scary. But I had one thing while I was very young. I'm talking between age 2 and 3. I used to see this man who looked just like my dad when he holds his cheeks to make this goofy face. I recall playing Legos with my brother in our room, and the guy walking by the window, turning slowly to look in, bulging eyes, and starts yelling. I would sit on the floor frozen in fear. My brother didn't see these things, and now that I think of it, this man I saw was never directly in front of me. I only saw him through windows. I am pretty sure I was one of those kids who hallucinated when they were very young. I used to see things out of windows. Mine was a large man that had on multiple layers of brown clothing. They were so stacked upon each other that it gave him a hunchback. He almost looked like a turtle. I never saw his face though, and had always assumed that it was a bum that would sit close to houses to keep warm. That was my logic at a young age. The really disturbing thing was he would laugh. It's hard to explain, but almost 20 years later, and I can still hear it in my head when I want. It was like a clown chuckle, you know, that It had a tempo, very consistent, but it was low and almost like a forced laugh, but it never stopped. I used to hear it outside my bedroom window, scared I would then move to my parents' room. He would move and sit on our patio. That laugh. Sometimes I would watch him. He would slowly turn to look at me, and I would quickly duck down below the windows. One time I had stayed up late, and our living room window had a very dark curtain. I was sitting on the chair we had by that window. I had been watching something on the television when I heard that laugh starting. I turned the television off so he wouldn't know I was there. The moonlight hit that curtain, and I could see his giant turtle-like outline. I was literally inches away from him. I sat there for what seemed like hours. I was powerless to move and had to listen to that laugh. Eventually, I had passed out from being so tired. We finally moved a couple of years later, and I never saw him again. I never had to hear that laugh, but I never forgot it. I think I hallucinated, like you, but man, it really sticks with you. My mom always bought snow globes for my grandma. When my grandma passed away, my mom took them back to our house. My mom put them up on the shelves that go around the entire living room. A few weeks have passed. My mom found a video that she wanted my brothers and I to watch because it reminded her of our grandma. We all sat down to watch it, and of course, near the end of the movie, our mom was crying. Right when the movie ends, all of the snow globes went off at the same time. The figurines didn't move on any of them, just the music. We all huddled together, of course, because we're scared as fuck, and my mom suddenly says, "Mom?" And all of the music stopped, and then the room became extremely cold. My mom suddenly felt really uncomfortable and had all of us run and get into the car as she drove us to our godmother's house. She cried for hours until she got a call from our dad saying he'd be home in a few minutes and should head back. We all got back inside. It was warm again, but all of the snow globes were shattered on the ground except for one. The one that was my grandma's favourite. That sounds malicious. Why would grandma want to scare the shit out of your family? It wasn't just grandma in the room. When I was young, I'd have a reoccurring dream. The dream had no real story behind it. It was just odd little clips of my life so far. The dream always ended the same way. It would just kind of fade to black and I'd hear voices. One saying, "I just had the weirdest dream," and a female voice would reply, "What about?" The first voice would then go on talking, and at that point I'd wake up. So about 8 months ago, at least 30 years later, I had the dream again. It was the weirdest thing. I could remember all those little clips, most of which I had long since forgotten about. I felt this overwhelming joy to be recalling all those lost childhood memories. The feeling was so intense, it was like being so happy I could cry. Never felt that before. But the end of the dream was different this time. And this is the God's honest truth. Instead of fading to black and hearing the voices, I just woke up. I was laying there feeling confused about the dream. Was this the same dream I'd had when I was little? I rustled my wife from her sleep and said, "I just had the weirdest dream." She replied, "What about?" I was wide awake, playing out the ending of the childhood dream. No sh*, everything I said to her over the next minute or two to describe the dream was actually as I had heard it when having the dream back when I was 8 or 10. It was like this hardcore case of deja vu. I have deja vu from time to time and I think it's cool, but this blew my mind. The next morning after the dream, and I was already starting to question myself about whether I actually had those dreams when I was young, or was it something my dream invented? But if I did have them, was I somehow peering into the future? I'm all about logic and science. I don't believe in ghosts, the supernatural, or even God for that matter. Sorry, Mom. I believe there's an answer for everything, but I'll be damned if I have an inkling as to what this was about. You have married the right woman. Alright, thanks for watching, guys. If you haven't seen the other part to this video, make sure you go and watch that now, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. See you soon.